This video is on writing body paragraphs, specifically for a literary essay, but you can apply these strategies hopefully anytime you're doing some writing. So here are some of our notes. Please take notes as we're taking this, as you're watching this video. So pause it and jot down these four main points. Fill them out as we get through them through the video. All right, so our focus is for working on body paragraphs. Obviously, I want you to be able to develop, revise, and generate some body paragraphs. If you haven't written them yet, you need to start there. So before we talk about that, I want you to look back in your own schema, your own understanding of what is a paragraph. See if you can define what makes a paragraph a paragraph. So the qualities that I'm looking for a paragraph are going to be three things. And hint, none of them are a set number of sentences. So the first thing a paragraph needs to be is it needs to be focused. It needs to have one kind of central goal that it's being written about. It also needs to be coherent, where it has this logical flow and these ideas like fit together and work together from, this sentence to this sentence to this sentence. It has to make sense, right? And then lastly, it needs to be developed, where I'm going to say we adequately describe or explain and support the idea that we're bringing up and the examples that we're bringing in. None of those are a number of sentences. This can be done, I've seen it done, in one sentence. Now that better be a dang good sentence, right? But it's possible, right? You can have a focused, coherent, and developed idea that is one sentence long. You could also write a 12-sentence paragraph that is complete crap, right? That's not focused and that's all over the place. And every sentence is this tiny, simple sentence. So get this idea of number of sentences out of your head and start focusing on ideas and development of paragraphs. So kind of the purpose behind body paragraphs is that we're going to take our idea, take our whatever our claim or our topic sentence, our inference is, and then we're going to start balancing between two things. We're going to balance our evidence, the facts, the quotations, the references that we have with our analysis of those pieces of facts and evidence. So always, anytime I present some evidence, I'm going to have to analyze it and explain it. I'll give you some tips for that here in a second. But first, let's make sure our evidence counts. Make sure this evidence is doing some good heavy lifting for your paragraphs. So first off, make sure that you've picked good, strong evidence. Make sure it's concise. Really think to yourself, like, did I pick the best piece of evidence that I could to support my idea? And remember, you don't even have to use full sentences, because sometimes, especially if you're pulling from Great Gatsby, some of those sentences get really long. You don't need to use the entire thing. You can pick out phrases or words or clauses or portions of it and make that work for you. So the general rule is don't go over 3 lines long. And that's Times New Roman double-space 12-point font. Just don't do it. If you do, you have to start doing block quotes, and I'm not going to teach you how to do block quotes yet. You can Google it if you really want to, but that's on you. And then secondly, there's kind of an unwritten 2-to-1 rule. So if I use a quote or if I talk about a reference for 3 lines, that means I better have 6 lines of analysis and explanation around there to adequately explain and develop this paragraph. Because remember, if I bring it in as a piece of evidence, I have to discuss it, and I have to discuss the whole thing. I don't get to just say, I'm going to give you this 3-line quote, but I'm only going to talk about one word. It's not going to cut it. Because that brings us to the idea of development. How do we elaborate and expand on these ideas that we've brought in to support our main ideas through evidence? So here's some thoughts. Number 1, why are these lines important enough to quote? Did I pick the right lines, right? If I'm trying to prove a point and I have a 200-page book, why did I pick this one specific sentence or this one phrase or this one word? Or why did I include this reference? And some sentence starters that you might use after you drop in a reference or a quote could be, this reference proves, or this quotation demonstrates blank, X, Y, or Z. And these will get you started on your path to analysis and explanation. Another important thing to think about, especially in literature, is what do we learn beyond the facts of this, right? Because a lot of times authors don't necessarily come out and tell you everything. You have to piece that together. So piece that together for your reader. Like, here's what we can understand beyond the literal words of this quotation or of this phrase. And then lastly, how does quoting these words or bringing in this reference clarify my thesis? Remember, because that's it's our focal point, it's a controlling idea. So everything that we bring in has to be in service and in reference back to our thesis. So you can pause this video, jot down some of these sentence starters, and use these in your body paragraphs. That's why I'm giving them to you. So here's our general structure and kind of balance of our the cycle of writing a body paragraph. So generally, we're going to have one central focus. Like here's my thesis for my paper, and then I'm going to support this thesis with a body paragraph that's about this idea. I'm going to have a topic sentence or a claim. And then I'm going to go through this cycle. And then I call it a cycle because sometimes we do it more than once. So I'm going to get some context for whatever evidence I'm going to present, right? So if I'm bringing in a quote, I just don't want to drop in some random quote from some random page on the book. Give me a little bit of context about the story. Explain to me what's going on or why this particular scene is important. So I'm not just getting, a quotation mark and here's what the narrator said. I'll show you what I mean here in an example. And then always, always, always provide an explanation for any piece of evidence. And remember, evidence could be a reference or a quotation. Either one works. And then occasionally, if we have two pieces of evidence for one topic, sentence, or claim, I'm going to have to go through this process twice, right? So context, evidence or reference, explanation, do it again, wrap up my paragraph. For my visual folks, this is kind of a good hierarchy and structure that you can follow and think about as you're writing. So I've got my intro and my thesis up at the top, and I want you to see how every other piece of my paragraphs and my paper comes back and goes back to this thesis, this main idea. So for every supporting idea, every topic sentence I write for each body paragraph, my evidence and my explanation are not only going to support this idea of the body paragraph, but they're going to come back and support the overall idea for my paper, for my essay. So my goal is for you to have 2 body paragraphs. If you have 3, that's awesome. That's kind of like what you should be shooting for if you're going for above and beyond, getting that A. But 2 is kind of my minimum requirement. Okay, last thing that I'll show you is this sample body paragraph. And this is posted up in Google Classroom. And it's color-coded for you, so you can take a look at it and see how I integrate context and evidence and analysis and explanation. So here's my topic sentence. This is what I'm trying to prove, is that Gatsby's infatuation with Daisy absorbs him from the very first meeting. And then I better provide some explanation about why that's important, right? And so see how I kind of blend my context and my evidence? Nick explains that Gatsby, as a poor soldier, initially meets Daisy in Louisville, and he instantly is enamored by her wealth and worry-free attitude. See what happens when I cut out that context? He instantly is enamored by her wealth, worry-free attitude, and social status. It works, but I feel like I lose something, like I've lost a little bit of my coherence here. So that's why that explanation, just a brief little bit, this is less than a line long, helps bring your reader along and just follow the logical flow of your ideas. That's especially true of quotations. So I want you to see how I introduce this quotation here. And then immediately on the heels of my quotation is I start my analysis of both pieces of evidence, right? So if I take looking at just the evidence, I've got, 1 line here and, a little over 2 lines here. That's 6 lines of evidence. So by my 2-to-1 rule, I should have almost 6 lines of analysis and explanation. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a word. So I was pretty close. So take a look at the difference or the kind of ratio of evidence to explanation. All right. So use this as a guide and holler at me with any questions. Good luck on your body paragraphs, folks.